Welcome to Get Wisdom Live with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. Welcome to another episode of Get Wisdom Live. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This week, Creator teaches about the yearnings of the soul. We're going to kind of dive into that nameless restlessness that I think we all can relate to, kind of a chronic restlessness. We feel like we're here to do something. We're not sure what. We have goals we want to accomplish, but we're not always sure what those are. And, how that all works in terms of God's plan. So that's what we're exploring today, Carl.
Well, there's more to this than one might think. And I had my own reservations in launching in to channel these questions with Creator. And there are some surprises, maybe not great ones, but there's more to understand about the workings of things and the purpose for who and what we are. And I think it's always useful to get a reminder of the reality that we're created beings and for a reason. And we have the attributes we do because we're designed to be that way. And then it comes out in everything we think and the actions we take, our behaviors, and whether we're living up to what our soul wants to accomplish or maybe going against it in some way. Mm-hmm. And working against ourselves and creating a conflict with our true state of being and our origins and the heritage and so on. And that's a big part of this. So it's instructive to look at this aspect because it's reflecting how we're living and maybe in comparison to how we best would live if we're in divine alignment.
Agreed. We'll get started. Chronic restlessness, the feeling you want and need something, but don't really know what or where it could even be found. And so we look for it everywhere. We look for it in our jobs, our relationships, and our hobbies. Some indefinable urge and insatiable hunger drives us to seek some kind of resolution without even a complete understanding of the problem. So we will begin there. Can Creator tell us why fundamentally we have this restlessness?
All right, and this is what I channeled from Creator. These are Creator's words. This, in effect, is a divine gift. Because you are all an extension of Creator's consciousness, you are like we are, ever restless, seeking more, wanting more, and that curiosity about what might be unexpected, what might be a new wrinkle, a new capability, a new expression via energy of some kind, provides the joys of existence. It is a kind of basic need you are experiencing with this restlessness because you are never satisfied yourselves. Part of that is the dilemma of being in physical form and no longer a light being and hugely deprived of your normal capabilities. You have no conscious awareness of this, but as an extension of your soul, there are many soul attributes that will be perpetually unsatisfied as a physical being. That will tend to stimulate you and spur you on. It is a fuel for creativity, and that can inspire and create an inner passion to pursue something, if only a hobby. But that can bring great rewards because it will help fill in the blanks that are missing and felt as a restlessness within. That drive can also be unsettling and detract from inner peace if there is too much fear it stirs up. That is a consequence of having been traumatized through so many lifetimes gone wrong. The physical environment is a tough arena. It is a testing ground and a proving ground for the divine human to see how you can do going up against forces of evil, frankly speaking. You knew this before you incarnated, but as a young infant must learn somewhere along the way in life the hard way, because you will bump up against evil again and again, directly or indirectly. So these are the forces in play and their origins. The good can outweigh the bad, but you must embrace it. You must cultivate it. You must nurture it. And you must appreciate it to want more and not end up hiding out, so to speak, through fear of what might happen that is an uncertainty and seems too daunting to pursue.
We did a show on boredom a while back, well over a year ago, I think. And I see, this yearning as kind of an opposite of boredom in the sense that as light beings, we can do many things simultaneously. So we can have any number of hobbies or pursuits or interests. But as a physical, we only have one focus of attention and a clock we have to obey. So it can, well, we have that, I think, subconscious memory of being able to do things, being able to multitask, right? And do many things simultaneously. And it can be a little bit frustrating to have to attend to just one thing at a time. At least I have that frustration. I don't know about you, Carl.
Well, I'm sure that's a part of what I experienced personally because I've always felt there's something big, there's something wondrous, there's something wonderful we're not privy to, we're not accessing, we're not taking advantage of. It's just not available to us somehow. It's just kind of a vague feeling. There's got to be more than just this. And so I think that was sensing this restlessness, we're calling it, because that's an apt description. There's an unsatisfaction about life in general. And you hear lots of people disparaging life
Yeah.
because it's so hard. And that's typically how that comes up, oh, life is so hard. Why is life so hard? And why do we have to struggle? Why is there so much suffering and all of that? And I'm sure some of that is that people are sort of intuitively tapping into a larger reality that they have experienced for long, long periods of time, in their lengthy existence before they became a physical human. So we surrender a lot just coming down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that rather than this be a sign of trouble necessarily or inadequacy, it's more the opposite. It's pointing to the fact there is a wider arena out there that's just not available to us at the moment, but it's showing us who we are and what we're capable of. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, Creator didn't mince any words. Creator said this was, in a sense, a gift. So,
Yes. Yeah, there you go.
different way of looking at it. U.S. creator Fernando Pessoa said, "The feelings that hurt most, the emotions that sting most, are those that are absurd. The longing for impossible things, precisely because they are impossible. Nostalgia for what never was, the desire for what could have been, regret over not being someone else, dissatisfaction with the world's existence. All these half tones of the consciousness create in us a painful landscape, an eternal sunset of what we are." Boy, that's uplifting, isn't it? What is Creator's perspective?
Well, Creator says this is certainly a glass half empty perspective, but it is very fitting given the environment you inhabit much of the time. Living in a world in which you must compete continually to hold your own, to establish yourself, or to get ahead, and certainly to excel compared to many, many others around you. You will need to use your ingenuity and all your talents and skills and build them over time to make the most of your life in becoming something greater. And certainly compared to others, to outdo them, to outshine them, to outperform them, as often expected of you in a competitive world. You must give of yourself. This takes a toll. It drags people down, it disheartens and discourages them, particularly if they lack some of the same skills as others for whatever reason. Many times, this is simply being disadvantaged, growing up in poverty without educational resources available, or not having two stable parents in the home, wanting to spend time with a child to raise it with encouragement, and consciously seeking ways to expose the child to cultural enrichment and so on. The many variables often work against the average person who ends up falling short in their own expectations. And that is what this question mostly focuses upon: the gap between the haves and the have nots. This is in the mind of the beholder more so than having a set of absolute standards. The media certainly dangles many images in front of you promoting the accoutrements of status and superficial lifestyles of all sorts, perhaps by the rich and famous, or simply by the people who are models chosen for their looks and given new cars to drive and model a lifestyle with such possessions, nice clothing, taking part in activities along with a happy family in tow, and so on. Many have these advantages, but many do not. And we can tell you that your soul yearnings will greatly outreach whatever life affords you. This is as true for the rich and famous as it is for the average or underadvantaged individual. Those with seeming wealth, status, privilege, and power have many inner disappointments because the materialistic trappings of perceived accomplishment and status are not deeply satisfying and have little to offer the soul. In the same way that is said about the rich possessed of great wealth, that you can't take it with you, the same is true of anything of a material nature. That is because nothing in the physical is truly needed by the soul, but rather a part of the environment around you and a kind of substitute for greater variety and pleasures, attainable through the manipulation of energy by consciousness, much of which cannot even take place for you as a physical being in a restricted mode of capability. So, here again is another perspective on dealing with lack as a major characteristic of the human dilemma. You are going through it for a reason, and that is to provide learning about difficulty, about sources of negativity, how to cope, how to surmount it if possible, and how to stay in divine alignment under the most difficult of circumstances. Much of the negativity people experience from this state of lack is settling for less rather than striving to find a better substitute for what might be desired but proves to be unreachable. There are not truly any dead ends, except as you let them be an endpoint and choose to not change course, to head in a differing direction, to find something else that might be better for all you know. Surrendering to your fate is always a mistake because there will always be more to do and more to learn up until your last breath. It is wise to take advantage of all that life offers, even if it is challenging and difficult. Every bit of the hard won learning will serve you through all of time. And this is what is unappreciated in having the dour perspective of the glass half empty analysis you describe.
This channeling reminds me of I read a biography of autobiography of David Rockefeller of all people, and that was a person that could pretty much buy anything they wanted that was available, for a price. But it was remarkable in reading it that he had devoted this huge chapter in the book to his art collection because there was lack, right? When you're competing with other billionaires to find that diamond in the rough that becomes the next big Van Gogh, um, you're dealing in rarity and lack essentially, and like I was also thinking about Jay Leno, who has a car collection that's beautiful and the envy of so many. But he also he gets rare cars and then tries to restore them, and then you end up in a situation of having to hunt down parts that are almost impossible to find, and you have to have them custom made, and that ends up being a huge pursuit. So again, he's playing in the lack arena, and finding satisfaction in there. So there's something to be said for pursuing, things that are hard to attain, and that even when we find that things are easy to attain because we have endless amounts of money, we'll gravitate to where we're challenged, And I think that's kind of what Creator's pointing out here.
Well, personally, I would rather have a hobby that helps restore the health of people rather than give me more shiny objects to house in a giant garage. But that's me. And but I think your analysis is an apt one, that these are examples of people wanting to have some extra depth in their existence and a kind of challenge. And meeting the challenge is the point.
Right.
It's growing new muscles, and it's engaging the being, the mind, and the purpose, and giving them a motivation and an agenda they can apply themselves to and work towards goals and accomplish things and so on. And that's a big part of existence because it's open-ended.
Yeah.
There's no limits as far as I know. And this is what Creator has told us. This is an unfolding of something grand, and it's only going to get grander.
Yeah.
So
And,
there's
and
no end to
apparently
your
this
reach.
apparently this restlessness is something we're probably going to take with us, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, right? So once we return to the light, we're a light being, we're still going to be chasing things and wanting something better, more profound, bigger, wider in scope. And we're told as much by Creator.
Yes, yes. But we'll have less negativity
Yes,
spoiling the party, and that is a big, big difference.
that's a
And
big.
that's what we're here to learn about, unfortunately. So we're trying to have a picnic in an asylum, and it's not exactly all fun and
No,
games.
no, definitely not. Oh, U.S. Creator, a Get Wisdom founder, recently shared this with a friend. Happiness is not tied to a location. You take your happiness and unhappiness with you wherever you go. If you can't find happiness here, you won't find it there either, or anywhere for that matter. What is Creator's perspective?
All right, Creator says, it is certainly the case that moving away is a common perceived answer for being in a state of difficulty, particularly when things are lacking, not working out, and seeming to be a kind of dead end where one is in a rut, where things are not changing for the better. And this is often misperceived as situational. And this gives rise to the common saying, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. And one needs to look for greener pastures, and so on. While it is true that there is an uneven distribution of environmental beauty, natural resources, good weather, economic stability, cultural refinements, and advanced opportunities, and so on, what is being addressed here is that water seeks its own level. And moving from one place to another without a change within does not increase your chances of success necessarily, because it will not add to your wherewithal. You will not be smarter, better, more skilled, more knowledgeable, more effective, and thus more successful simply through a geographic change, even if there are more opportunities in the new setting. Finding a better environment could bring about a change for the better, but most times people cannot sort out what is truly better except in the most superficial way that is based on many, many assumptions. Moving to a nicer location might actually decrease chances of success in terms of having stability, economic viability, opportunities for a career advancement, and so on. If one is in a better location in terms of the economy, the demographic picture, where there is a high percentage of college graduates, for example, and much more desirable weather, and so on, Such geographic advantages will be highly sought out, and the competition will be much greater, and criteria for acceptance much more stringent to find a job and be able to pay rent or mortgage if there is a higher cost of living, because it is a more enjoyable location and the competition is keener for housing and employment. The most important issue being addressed in the question is that the biggest liability people face is their own inner shortcomings, their inner doubts, their inner fears, their inner reservations, their inner misconceptions, and faulty thinking created by much prior trauma that instilled faulty beliefs within the person and left many, many karmic wounds that will project negativity into the future. And the law of karma will circle around and bring the same challenges back to you if things were never healed along the way. The purpose of this paradigm is to ensure you learn the lessons of life, how to navigate, how to become successful, how to develop the self, and hold your own in a competitive environment with challenges and obstacles of many kinds. If all you do is change location and do not change yourself somehow, you will have the same inner liabilities wherever you go, the same prejudices, the same doubts and flaws. If you have been relegated to the sidelines because people find things about you to dislike, moving away and starting over in a new setting will not magically make people accept you, because eventually people will find the same things to dislike and you will be back where you left off on the sidelines once again.
So, I think a crude litmus test on this would be asking the question, why are you moving? Are you moving because you're running towards something or running away from something? There's plenty of reasons to move, and we all like beautiful, gorgeous locations. But I hadn't actually considered what Creator said here about how moving to a desirable location can actually make life tougher because of the competition. It's obvious thinking about it now, but I hadn't actually considered that, so it's interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm a big believer in creative job changing changes being the best way to advance a career.
Yeah,
I've just seen legions of people stuck in a rut. This the classic thing. The person who's good at typing, and so they're condemned to be a secretary for life because they serve a need, and nobody wants to give them wider duties because they need a good typist.
right.
So it can be a trap, and so a creative job change though entails being prepared to do something more, growing into that role before you make that leap so you can handle a wider level of responsibility and so on. So this speaks to the need for the inner wherewithal
Yeah,
that creators
yeah,
pointing out.
yeah. It's easier to move from one success to another success. But if you're moving from a self-perceived failure and hoping that success is going to await you with a new location, that's a little more dicey. At least that's been my experience anyway.
Yeah.
U.S. creator Audrey Niffenegger, that's a name for you, wrote in her first book, The Time Traveler's Wife, why is love intensified by absence? What can creator tell us?
Okay, well, this seems pretty straightforward. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, as it comes immediately to mind
Of
when I hear
course.
this question. Well, let's see what Creator says. This is an excellent example of the kind of inner yearning we have been discussing with you, and one most can relate to because love is such a strong imperative, especially when coupled with the inner passions of the physical body wanting an intimate relationship with a member of the opposite sex. That is a powerful motivation for inner yearning. There is nothing more delightful and satisfying than to fall in love deeply and have that love returned by the object of your affections. That is the closest to a state of perfection attainable by a physical human being with another. to live lives together as a couple and be deliriously happy with the arrangement. Even when that is not achieved, but something very rewarding, to lose it will be tragic. And the contrast between having those heights of love satisfied and then to have all hope dashed of it continuing through a breakup of the relationship can be quite devastating and even drive some to suicide because the loss becomes so overwhelming. So it is the fact that a close, intimate love relationship is the epitome of the heart fulfilled, that any loss of love relationship will be so painful, and some will never recover unless a new relationship is kindled that can eventually grow to be as rewarding or even more so than the prior failed one. We have talked to you a number of times about how love is the currency of the universe and the purpose of existence. It is for the giving and receipt of love. Love makes the world go round, as the saying goes, and it is true for the universe as well. The more love you have coming to you, the more you can give to others, and the more love that is shared back and forth and among human beings, the better existence will become, and the more satisfying and rewarding your world will be, and all within it who can at least take part and share the bounty. What keeps you away from love is a problem by definition, because love is the object, love is the goal, love is the standard, and love is the measure of the inherent worth of anything and everything. Love has many flavors and dimensions, but ultimately, everything can be translated into presence or absence of love to some degree or another, if only in comparison or contrast with something else. So, love relationships by intimate partners are the keenest and most intense expressions of love that most people can experience if they use care in choosing the right partner. There are other kinds of love as well. So the subject is more vast than embraceable by romantic love alone. But you are primed to seek the latter, especially with a coming of age and maturation, because it is a hormonal imperative as well as an emotional, mental, and spiritual one.
Well, we are essentially made to love, is what Creator is saying, and we also have memories like elephants, at least in a spiritual level, with the akashic records and everything else. Nothing is forgotten, right? So, um, there's just a desire to have that, and when your heart is broken, it's tough to forget. I mean, I haven't. I remember every time I've had my heart broken, and if I stop for a moment and kind of dwell on it, I can feel the pain even today from each and every one. So I can commiserate, Carl.
Well, I think most people have that experience somewhere along the way, even if only as a youngster, just kind of feeling that awakening of attraction to lovable others and then feeling shut out or ignored or being too timid and fearful to engage, or maybe being bold and engaging in a relationship but then blowing it because you're young and foolish and crude about how you go about it, and then you turn the other person off and they dump you, and then
Right.
you learn the hard way. There's an art to love. There's skill you need, and a little sensitivity, and it's not all one way to satisfy the self. But anyway, this is a vast arena of possibility and a reflection again of our divinity.
Yeah.
It couldn't be any clearer, because that's it. This is what the universe is all about. It's all about love in many forms, but love is the currency, and that is such an insightful and powerful tool that anyone can use in a kind of informal way to figure out a moral dilemma, for example.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
love is always the answer, and the absence of love is always a problem. And so you need the one to deal with the other. But how often do we think of that?
Right,
You
right.
look at our current politics, for example, and it's hate, hate, hate all day long, fear and loathing.
Oh
And we're
my.
supposed to love one another. I mean, come on, this it doesn't
Yeah.
seem to fit. It's like oil and water. Well, that's a problem.
Well, I
That's
love
not
you if you.
reflecting there's something wrong with God's equation. If the problem is with the people who can't find a way to love and be accepting at least of the rights of people to differ.
Right. That's, I think, the main point. Because I'll love you, Carl, if you convert to my thinking 100%. Right. So,
Well, I know that about you. That's why I
that's
hide my true nature. So I'll be safe, because
there
I
you
know
go.
you'll judge me and I'll be in big trouble.
Oh,
What a way to
we're
live.
gonna we're gonna continue on this theme with the next question. Actually, this passage is from a poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay. Time does not bring relief. You all have lied who told me time would ease me of my pain. I miss him in the weeping of the rain. I want him at the shrinking of the tide. The old snows melt with every mountainside, and last year's leaves are smoke in every lane. But last year's bitter loving must remain heaped on my heart, and my old thoughts abide. What is Creator's perspective?
All right. Creator says, this is the perfect illustration of the downside of love and having a strong commitment to a relationship that is intense and passionate. Its loss will be wounding, at least for a time. When one does not recover, it is because of the trauma left in the wake of lost love. What this speaks to is a need for healing and repair. It is not truly noble to suffer, nor is the loss of love meant to be a never ending tragedy to be suffered for the duration of one's lifetime. When that plays out, it reflects the fact that someone has been damaged by the loss of love because of a prior vulnerability. So, what is on display is not something noble and appropriate because of the size of the loss. The fact it leaves such a hole is because something was already fragile about the one in love. So, in addition to its satisfactions and rewards, it was shielding from view an inner vulnerability and a less than robust makeup. So, love was helping the person get by and feel secure and comfortable. So, that loss of that love relationship exposed an inner defect of a sort, a state of incompletion that was not created by the love relationship, but compensated for, creating the illusion of a kind of heightened experience that made a person feel compatible and joyous. But that was a kind of illusion to begin with, because love alone from another cannot make a person whole. It might make them quite happy, and if lifelong, might get them by. But if their makeup is uneven and having some deep wounding and vulnerability, resulting in a lack of confidence in the self and self esteem, with the disappearance of a lover, this will leave the person who is incomplete often bereft and miserable. And they may never recover because the problem has been all along that there were healing needs not being attended to. And seeing to that and being successful in doing a repair will be all the more difficult when a person has been heavily traumatized by the loss of a love relationship that leaves them with little or nothing, at least in terms of how they feel about life. This speaks to the need to work at things, to work to heal the karmic backlog of trauma from multiple lives that were often short and brutal. Love was fleeting and often unattainable many times, given the uneven state of being when one was born into poverty or during periods of famine or endless war. Many times, the devastating effects of a lost love will stir up memories of losing loved ones under the worst of circumstances, adding insult to injury that is not fully understood consciously. But what this illustrates is many humans have a huge inner liability from their unhealed trauma. And it may well overtake them in their current life if left unattended, because eventually a setback of some kind will stir up trouble that may become overwhelming.
Well, this is a fascinating channeling, but it's also very much a divine perspective because the normal perspective is most people don't even believe in reincarnation, for instance, and that all we got to do is just make it to heaven and all of our problems will be solved. So if I can hook up with somebody who can get me by and afford me a bit of happiness along the way, hey, I'm all for that. So this is definitely a divine perspective where creator is saying, hey, maybe you need to work on yourself a little bit.
Well, this is the choice. Do you want to be miserable in a kind of desperate holding action to just sort of hang on for dear life until you eventually pass on and get to go back home? Or do you want to overcome that inner vulnerability to become stronger and reopen like a flower and be ready for love once again? And that is more likely to bring love back to you because you'll seek it then
Yeah.
instead of shying away and feeling used up and broken and desperate. I know people like this. I have a client right now who was hiding out from an abusive husband for over a decade, still married to the guy because she was afraid he would kill her.
Oh, geez.
He passed away and she's bereft. She's bereft. I thought this is going to free her.
Right.
She's going to just like burst on the scene now. She'll be ready for a true love relationship and won't have to hide and fear. No. And creator told me she's so focused on that relationship that it sort of filled that inner void, and she built her life around it. And now that it's gone, there's a huge hole there. And it's really something that was more ghastly than beneficial. But this
Right.
this shows how we can get into a rut. And all the time, she was shrinking. This was using her up. This was diminishing her. She was losing more and more faith in herself and everything else. And now that the problem seems to have ended, she has nothing to go with, nothing to work with. She's lost that basic platform, that foundation. So this is a healing need.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And even in an abusive relationship, there's probably a tendency to think, well, he's obsessed with me, right? So that's really just a form of love, and that we end up saying, see, somebody cares about me. They wouldn't be after me if they didn't, right?
Yeah, I'm
So
sure that's part of the dynamic.
yeah,
It certainly creates a lot of drama and focus, and you're not sitting around bored because you're this is an ongoing drama that you're a part of, and it uses up your energy and sucks all the oxygen, and you just accept it as an inevitability, or can,
yeah,
and that's
and there might
always a
even be a
mistake. But
desperate hope buried in there that he'll wake up with a revelation one morning and suddenly be transformed and be the love object I always dreamed of. Who knows?
well, I
But
mean, that's
yes,
that's part of the dynamic with this client, that she is so negative about her own self-worth that even someone who's abusive, who might take some interest in her, is attractive to her because
right,
it's unprecedented and unexpected.
yeah,
So there you go. I mean,
yeah,
this is a pitfall
yeah.
that
This is the
needs to
best
be
I can do, but
avoided.
it's better than nothing. Yeah, yeah. U.S. creator Lionel Shriver wrote, a lot of people get so hung up on what they can't have that they don't think for a second about whether they really want it. What is creator's perspective?
All right, creator says, this is an interesting description of what happens when people live their lives with superficial thinking. And this is common in the young, who are often reacting primarily to peer pressure, along with parental expectations, and have not yet developed wisdom to understand what is truly important, and will be thinking about superficial characteristics, the trappings, the accoutrements of seeming success, the status symbols, the characteristics enjoyed by those who are seen as being popular and are emulated by their peers. When people reach an older age and begin to develop wisdom as a consequence of having more life experience, they may look back on their earlier days with some chagrin and amusement about what they thought was important or was seen as being cool or hip. And the stories are legion of school reunions that reveal the most popular members of a class might have turned out having very ordinary or even mediocre lives, but simply were possessed of superficial characteristics that made them the envy of others, because no one in the peer group was looking at deeper issues and concerns, but only on the surface of things like who was more attractive, who was the best athlete, and so on. What this points to is the wisdom of seeking and appreciating wisdom as a life goal. It is wisdom that is a measure of when you have truly arrived with respect to accomplishments of significance. If you are rich but foolish and in a state of ignorance, your money will likely be misapplied on foolish things that are wasteful and unsatisfying. In effect, your wealth does not raise you up or further your interests as one might expect, but will ultimately add to disappointment and even suffering if it is squandered and becomes a source of greater failure, because there is so much more to lose and will be felt keenly. Wisdom is hard won, and that is true across the board with respect to all of the accoutrements of true success, which is surmounting and becoming enriched through life experience to do things more effectively while more in alignment, meaning that you are an asset to yourself as well as others, living a life in balance to help yourself as well as others advance through the giving and receipt of love. That requires true spiritual alignment in a world where most are self serving and will as likely take advantage of others as assist them. Many live an entire lifetime with little positive growth in things that matter. And indeed, many lifetimes are a setback with a net loss overall through falling behind because the soul is not being served.
Well, I think it's probably a safe statement to say that a lot of people are not pursuing wisdom with focus as their life goal, you know. And myself, I feel I have that has been my primary life goal for the vast majority of my life. And the upside of having such a goal is that there's always an opportunity to pursue it, unlike other goals you might have, you know. So even if you find yourself in prison, even in solitary confinement, seeking wisdom is something that you can pursue even in those situations. So I think it's a really, and Creator obviously is endorsing that as a primary life goal for sure.
Yeah, don't settle for less, I think is the takeaway here.
Yes. John Galsworthy wrote, "It was such a spring day as breathes into a man an ineffable yearning, a painful sweetness, a longing that makes him stand motionless, looking at the leaves or grass, and fling out his arms to embrace he knows not what." What is Creator's perspective?
Creator says this is the perfect description of the inner yearning for divinity. Beauty, as in the beauty of much in nature, exists because it is a divine creation you were similarly created to appreciate and be aware of. So that perception of the environment with respect to it having many enticements and many thrilling experiences brings you closer to us, because all that is beautiful about nature is an act of love in our providing you with that loving nest to inhabit. Whenever you appreciate a beautiful day with a summer breeze, the sound of wind in the trees, the shimmering of the leaves in the light of an afternoon, and the aroma of the living things of the earth will stir deep within you an awareness of divine love. And that will bring with it, inevitably, a kind of longing for us that is not thought out logically and with the intellect, but a kind of instinctual awareness of the divine presence. That is why such experiences in nature are so notable and so rewarding, to be long remembered and recounted in literature again and again. In fact, novels are replete with descriptions about the current weather as a part of the storyline. Because your place within nature and how it makes you feel is always a kind of touchstone, giving feedback about how you are doing with respect to what you have and what is missing that is deeply important somehow. Nature is a kind of substitute for being with the divine because it is the next best thing other than the love of another human like yourself.
Wow, that last sentence is powerful. Nature is a kind of substitute for being with the divine. I never actually thought of it that way, but yeah, that resonates something deep for sure.
Well, we take it for granted, that we like going to the outdoors and we like going to natural settings and the national parks and local areas where there's grass and trees and trails you can meander on, and there's a much deeper reason for it, and I think it's wonderful. It's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, I'm reminded of our where creator. I think creator said something like, "You asked the purpose. What was the purpose of like the orchid, the flower orchid?" And creator said it was to be beautiful and pleasing to humans, to sentient beings.
Yes,
And
yes,
I actually have friends that would like balk at that and think, "No, the orchid has its own existence and is just as important as you and I are. We're not that special." But but apparently we are. So,
yeah,
this idea that we're not special, I think, is a problem in its own right.
yeah. It's remarkable what we take for granted without realizing the deep significance of things.
Yeah. Eric Pevernaghi, I'm sorry, Eric Pevernaghi wrote, "If we only see things through the cold-eyed lens of factuality and don't listen to the yearning and screaming of unexpressed feelings, life may remain bleak in a mire of clinical hollowness, sodden in apathy and indifference." Yeah, that's a mouthful. What is Creator's perspective?
The Creator says, we see this passage as reflecting the poverty of ideas as an abstraction, as an intellectual exercise alone, and not experienced viscerally through physical immersion. Because you are a physical being, you experience things through the senses very keenly. And this is tied to many inner rewards that are pleasing to the senses because you are primed to have feelings and discriminate among varied stimuli to feel some as annoying, some as repugnant, but others as delightful or even thrilling. It is unfortunately the case that many people who are withdrawn from others and isolated may live very constrained lives with little joy because they are missing out on the amplification of positive sources of enjoyment created by participating with other human beings in an activity or shared endeavor of some kind, to have a feeling of belonging and accomplishment, acceptance, and even love, if only that of a loving friendship or colleague appreciating you for being of like mind and willing to share life with them. You were made to need others because there is so much to learn from participating in relationships. Being with the self is not only isolating, it is limiting because there will be a much smaller repertoire available to you of things to do and be. If you only have yourself to satisfy, that will greatly restrict your choices in what to do for fun or obtaining a feeling of accomplishment. Performing an amazing feat of some kind will be self satisfying, but much more so if others are aware of it and admire you because of it. That admiration is a form of love, after all, and constitutes a reward you cannot give to yourself because self love is ultimately limited. If your thoughts and yearnings remain totally within your mind and are never even shared with another, they will never lead to much. When in a relationship, the thoughts you share will be reflected back to you and perhaps amplified and greatly encouraged if they meet with acceptance. And as a kind of reward, will spur you on to think more and do more. And much growth will result and will be ultimately much more satisfying than what you could do solely with your own perspective and ruminations.
This actually gets me thinking about the interlopers because they're all psychopaths, so they basically are all self-centered and probably not prone to give compliments out or to say nice things about the people around them, except if they're more powerful, and so that becomes a form of flattery or something. But they don't really mean it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is just kind of a stark revelation here. That we really do need other people in our lives, Carl.
Well, no person is an island, to coin a phrase, and this gives you a deeper insight.
Absolutely. Lewis Erdrich wrote, "Life will break you. Nobody can protect you from that, and being alone won't either. For solitude will also break you with its yearning. You have to love, you have to feel. It is the reason you are here on earth. You have to risk your heart. You are here to be swallowed up, and when it happens that you are broken or betrayed or left or hurt or death brushes too near, let yourself sit by an apple tree and listen to the apples falling all around you in heaps, wasting their sweetness. Tell yourself that you have tasted as many as you could." What is Creator's perspective?
Creator says, we think this is a beautiful metaphor describing the value of love and the rewards it brings. A life never tasting the fruit is a life wasted because it is all about love. Love needs a place to go, as it is a projection of energy that seeks a target, because there is an intention for something to happen always when love is generated. There needs to be a loving acceptance of the self, but one cannot love oneself romantically in the way one can love another, because a relationship with a suitable partner doubles the energy available to be exchanged and acts and adds a variety of possibilities that cannot be conjured up within the self alone other than through imagination. And even there, fantasies will be limited in quantity and quality in the absence of life experience to teach you what is possible to happen. Romantic love is one of the supreme experiences possible for a physical human. There are many exalted forms of love, so romantic love is not the be all and end all of existence, but it is quite powerful and extremely rewarding and will be a great teacher, especially because of its intensity and value. People need to learn wise use of love and the intimacy of a close, passionate love relationship so they appreciate it, value it, cherish it, and nourish it, and reward it in like measure. These all entail a soul growth and expansion each and every time there is such a relationship that evolves over time. Opportunities to have a love relationship are truly special, highly rewarding, and add great value through richness and joy. To miss out on this is most unfortunate because it is an important teacher in reminding you of what is possible and what you might be missing in your life if it is filled with darkness rather than light.
Well, it certainly is unfortunate if you lack that in your life. But, we're also told that we have problems to solve too, and that, a relationship that is extremely rewarding can also be distracting and might not make you available for some of the work that has to be done too. So there's always perspective, Carl.
Well, it's a healing challenge to cope with existence here in the physical, and
Yeah.
we see this every time we have an outing like this. It comes back to healing.
Well, let's talk about healing, Carl. U.S. Creator, unfulfilled, unrequited, and often ineffable soul yearnings can be immensely painful and even debilitating. Can creators share how empowered prayer and the Lightworker Healing Protocol can be used to clear the obstacles to fulfillment, intimacy, and contentment by truly equipping the individual with tools they can easily and productively use to remodel and rejuvenate their interior experience?
The Creator tells us it is very important that people realize that you are here to learn and grow in the experiencing and utilization of love as a purpose for existence and for your soul journey as a whole. When your life is unsatisfying, unfulfilled, and more about yearnings and disappointments than joys and happiness, there are things in the way that need to be addressed. Almost always, this is because of inner corruption through the negative effects of trauma, being wounded by life, and not having a way to fix it. This worsens things and can create a chronic state of depletion and inadequacy, leading to many kinds of failed opportunities that only compound the damage. This will be seen by the law of karma as a kind of transgression against the self, because you have an obligation for the care and feeding of your soul. And when this fails to happen, it will count against you. And the law of karma will see that a similar set of circumstances will arise again in the next life, if not the current one, to provide an opportunity as a life lesson to surmount the prior difficulties and heal the traumatic consequences. If that fails to happen, the karmic baggage will grow heavier. You will not escape, but continue to face greater and greater penalties from being unaware of the healing needs and the imperative of addressing them once and for all to get out from under this overhang of negativity that will continue to haunt you indefinitely. You are all walking wounded. The answer is using empowered prayer to enlist divine assistance and form a partnership with the divine to work in a purposeful way towards clearing the backlog of unhealed trauma. The first objective, more readily obtainable through empowered prayer, is to not compound the damage by adding new difficulties on top of the old. It is often fresh trauma that reopens old wounds and gets old karma rumbling to make things worse. So your past is like a series of landmines created by each experience of difficulty, suffering, and loss. The stored negative emotion will be triggered by a new setback, and then it will be off to the races, with unhappiness growing until a solution is found to bring healing to bear. This is what the Lightworker Healing Protocol is designed to help with, because it is a series of high level requests for divine help for any and all sources of negativity that can befall a human being, and mirror prior karmic injury and take care of both the new and the old difficulties and allow a complete and thorough healing to drain away the negativity and leave you on a higher plateau as a springboard for more likely success and happiness from your efforts. This is what healing is for, to make your soul journey go more easily and fruitfully, and certainly more lovingly, both for you and those you interact with. With that as the goal, it is easier to see where the defects lie, where the gaps are in your life needing to be filled. And this will suggest things to focus on and cultivate to more likely bring a reward to make up for the shortfall. You will learn by doing to do this better and more effectively with each renewed attempt to right the wrongs of the past. Having a highly refined tool like the Lightworker Healing Protocol implemented through a divine partnership on your behalf is the ideal way to progress more efficiently and rapidly, so you have a chance to make something of your life in the here and now that will also translate into future lives that are more effective and rewarding. The sooner you start, the better things will get, and the sooner this will come about. You must take the initiative. We cannot do it for you because we must follow your lead. Using these sophisticated tools to form a divine partnership with an agenda to serve you and your soul's growth is the smartest and best thing you can do with your efforts, because it will pay many dividends, carrying you into a better future you yourself will create with divine help. That is how it is done. It cannot truly happen any other way. There are no shortcuts. While miracles can happen, they are not commonplace and will be in service to short term goals and needs that might be a dramatic turnaround in something, but there will still be a mountain of unhealed karma you will have to contend with eventually. This is why you are never done with life and why there is always a need for more. Part of that need, that restlessness, that yearning, is a desire to escape from the quagmire you have been trapped in for many, many lifetimes. So it is not just returning to a light being mode that is underlying these yearnings, but finding a way to fix the inner disquiet from the rumblings of unhealed karma, not all of which are perceived consciously, but will stir emotions to the negative and are a liability all the way along, especially because they are ill defined and impossible to fully reckon with any other way. There is no pill you can take for karma. You need divine healing, help to solve the biggest dilemmas you face. The sooner you get started, the sooner you will benefit. We are waiting to help you, and you can always count on this.
Well, I think creators answered this particular question emphatically, and that is, when is a good time to start healing efforts? And the point is now, right? It's not when you get to the light. It's not your next lifetime. It's not when you move to Australia or whatever. The time to begin your healing is now, Carl.
Yes, and we like to see people get started and take advantage of the time that's on their side, at least as far as one can tell, rather than wait until you're old and gray, your joints are a mess and painful, your mobility is restricted, and you might have a weak heart and diabetes, cancer, and a bad liver. You're coming way, way from behind in that circumstance. And the message for those who are younger is there's no time to waste because
No,
everything you do will help in the long term. And the more effort you put in, the quicker you'll get to a better future.
and there's no better effort than to expend it on the Lightworker Healing Protocol. You can download our ebook, get a Lightworker Healing Protocol, getwisdom.com/LHP, getwisdom.com/LHP, and also get our prayer book, getwisdom.com/prayer. That's all we have for this week's Get Wisdom Live. Thanks, everybody.
Be well.